So we are going to get right into it, but I was thinking I was going to talk about Lisa, so you checked that off my list. Thank you. And then I was like, well, Andrew gave us gardening, which is not my area of wisdom or expertise. And then Lisa gave us a bridge. But I'm going to invite you to think about a cocktail, given the time of day, and where we're all headed after. So I am at the Financial Security Program. Like our name, our work is all about wealth and ownership and thriving lives in the U.S. And several years ago, which actually got us into this work and eventually over to Andrew and the team here, we did some work building a financial security framework for youth and young adults, knowing that that was different from adults, older adults, and the babies of the world. And we had 4 components that, again, when we're talking to different audiences, we might say are braided together like a challah bread. But I prefer to think about it as like the perfect cocktail of different ingredients that together are just like, mwah, chef's kiss. And so what we discovered in this work was that the 4 components for financial security for young adults are financial stability, opportunity pathways, which is really like no debt, wealth building career pathways, whether that's school or workforce career development, but that you should be able to launch into the world in a meaningful way without debt. Financial capabilities, so the knowledge and skills to make financial decisions, because young adults are starting to make so many on their own, and support and guidance. So we've talked a lot about that today. Where's the mentoring? Where's the peer guidance? Where's the adult kind of cushioning and support for decision making? But young people need all of these at once, like in the right amounts, just like the cocktail that you're going to have in a little bit today. And without them, they just simply will not thrive. And so it's our responsibility to ensure that's happening for young adults wherever they are in their lives at that moment, whether in school, training, or not connected to either of those things. So today on our panel, we're going to get into this a little bit, and we're going to first start with William. I think we already said a lot about like where young people's voices need to not just be sitting, providing expertise, but guiding and co-creating and directing. So I know that's a big, also, okay. I'm not going to fully introduce William, but please go into your program and read the extraordinary set of like work and experience this young person has had. He's on our community advisory group. He is just like a thrill to get to know. So that's just your homework. But what I would love for you to do to kick us off is like hold us in this room as Gen Xers and olders really accountable for the real financial lives of young people right now. Like what is happening with you and your peers? What do we keep getting wrong about what is like so real for you around your finances?
Oh, yeah. Like it is this weird time, which I feel like every generation has like that sort of time where it's like financially uncertain. But one of the biggest things, I'm going to start out personally, like I am like graduating soon. I'm entering the job market. I got my 5th rejection this week. I'm like, in my head, been trying to like process that. And I'm like, what else do I need to do? Like, I did everything right that they said. You go to college, do internships, network, do connections. But still, I am not getting like the results.
Yeah.
And it just leads to this like generational apathy that I keep seeing with my fellow peers of like, the American dream that we were once promised of like getting a house, like getting married, having kids, like what it means to be like financially successful here in America has not turned out to be true. So it sucks. And I've been able to be in these like very like relationship heavy groups like the Obama Foundation, and like I'm part of one of their like Voyager scholarship programs, and there's 100 other peers that are doing amazing work across the country, and they feel uncertain. So I can't imagine how it is for like people who don't have that same privilege and same access to those like opportunities to encounter this job market.
Yeah.
We have one of the highest like wealth inequalities thus far. Housing prices through the roof. It is bad for us right now, and we are trying to figure that out.
Right, and you're specifically in a time in your life where you're just, because you were also going to school, not earning a ton and trying to make it work right now. And we've been recently doing research that my colleague Shada is over there, has been leading with support from the Casey Foundation around the changes to our public benefits system, HR 1, what that means for young people, how are young people feeling, how's that impacting their trust in government. Anyways, it's going to be out soon. It's going to be really fascinating and important work for us all. But what those folks were telling us is feelings of isolation, feeling like it's normal to struggle. Like, this is just how it is. I should only get to eat half a ramen bowl, right? And not really having the resources you need to even have the brain capacity to be so planful. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like that came out in parts of our conversation and in the research that we've been doing.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So Kate, you focus on learning and like behavioral science and kind of what are the experiences we need to have our brain do the things it should? That's my summary of Kate's like lifetime body of work and accomplishments at NYU. I am not an academic, but what does like learning and decision-making science tell us about what William and his peers are going through? Again, not to like put words into his mouth, but like let's provide some sort of formal context to it.
Sure. So many of the themes that we've heard about today, agency, learning by doing, I think are spot on. We know that developmental science tells us that at all ages, we learn better when we have the opportunity to take agentic action. We're learning about the consequences of our own actions, and there's a cycle of exploring, taking action, observing outcomes, modifying our behavior. That's really the critical element of learning to make good decisions. And in the domain of parenting to foster financial independence, that means we need to grant some degree of agency to kids over their ability to make financial decisions and understand the financial systems that they're operating within. I think parents often think it's a gift to protect their kids from coming into contact with those realities. But of course, if they do that too much, then kids hit a cliff where they need to suddenly take over when they achieve parental independence. One of the things I heard William talking about a lot was the degree of uncertainty that's present in the environment right now in terms of the job market, rising housing costs. One thing we know about adolescent decision making, despite all of the lore about adolescence being a heightened period of risk taking, yes, but if you describe a risky prospect, if you describe a risky decision to an adolescent, they'll usually be as risk averse as a young adult. But uncertainty is a situation where the probabilities of the potential outcomes are unknown.
Right.
And I think that's the decision context that most adolescents are operating within right now.
Yep.
What laboratory studies of decision making under this kind of uncertainty, which scientists often call ambiguity, is, what the science has shown is that adolescents tend to show a willingness, whereas at older ages we shrink away, we shy away from uncertainty.
Rigid. Yeah, that's right.
Adolescents are willing to engage with it, which suggests a sort of optimism in their evaluations, and I think that's really important in this.
Yeah, in this context, that's right. Because it is a unfair situation that William and his peers in this generation are in, like so much more uncertainty, global chaos, things happening in our own country that are unspeakable, truly. But you guys actually have a different kind of tolerance than I do to get through it, right? There's still some opportunity and chance, basically. One of the things that you said, William, and that you also picked up Kate on, was just these are complex systems right now that you're having to interact with and deal with. And I'll just note that when you have less resources, like William and his peers do right now, again, just sort of life cycle wise, and because we're pulling resources away from young people right now, you are also kind of putting yourself not just in a complicated financial system, but in the worst parts of it, the most predatory parts of the financial system, the ones that are going to do the lifelong bad things to your credit, to your financial future. Whether or not you realized it, you're stuck in sort of a less than desirable part of our financial service system, and we're leaving a lot of our young people to be stuck there. But Paige, you are what we called on the phone call to prep young adjacent, just out of being young, not quite
1 year outside of the
1 year outside of being young, not quite at this Gen Xer level who recently went to a Journey concert. Talked to me about that at the cocktail hour. But when you were in this phase of your life, you were sort of like, this is pardon my language, like a shitty, complicated system. My friends and I need to eat, go to school, invest in ourselves, and we've got to make this better. So I'm curious how you would describe a little bit of what you guys are up to, but more in the context of like, what are the lessons learned about how to build better financial systems, which includes our benefits system for young adults?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And the systems that we have in place today really weren't designed to be accessible. They were in fact designed to be the exact opposite of that and hard to, access the resources that young people actually need to be successful in like careers and education, and other things to improve their lives. And I experienced a lot of this when I was in college. So I was working, 3 jobs and still could barely afford food and rent and all these other things. And ironically, one of the jobs that I had was actually studying food and housing insecurity on campus. So while I was experiencing a lot of these issues, I was, listening to student stories about this and really hearing that whole like systemic pattern of how, students were skipping meals or like couldn't get to class because of like transportation issues and things like that. And so what I found is that even though resources were available, students weren't accessing them. That was because of 2 main reasons. So one, they didn't feel like it was for people like them. So like they didn't see themselves in, the people who were using public benefits or using food pantries, or other things that could have made a huge difference. And then besides that, even when they did try, the systems were way too hard to actually access. So like the application processes were too long. It was hard to figure out where to go and where to find help. And so I started the Student Basic Needs Coalition to address those 2 issues, really build capacity for campuses to make it easier for students to both see themselves as people who, can benefit from these resources and actually receive them. And so, we found a couple of main ways.
What are the key design principles that everyone here could take away to whatever system, but in particular a financial system?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just simplifying access. So making sure there are streamlined processes from the time you first engage with the young person, whether that's like in the admissions process for college, whether that's, maybe in the college planning process. The second thing is meeting students where they are. So, having engaging peer leaders, like the ASAP program, to really be where students are, and then using tech to increase capacity.
Right.
So I think that that's key right now too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just note that, and you all may know this, especially you in academic environments, like university, who said intrusive earlier? The woman from CUNY ASAP, that'll be my favorite word of the day. Universities are quite intrusive about your personal finance. They actually know everything about William, his friends, the, kids in the class with him. So they could be far more involved in helping to focus and identify and like really facilitate, almost create the MacGyver layer over the really crappy public benefits application process systems that don't talk to each other to make it much easier for students. And you guys basically did that as student leaders.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's a really important, like, if we can't change federal policy, and in fact, federal policy just changed to make it harder to access benefits, that doesn't mean we just moan. It means we build bubble wrap around it. We use creativity, ingenuity, and tech to make it easier to access. And you guys have done that like in such an exemplary way. Claudia, MyPath has been working with young leaders, young workers for as long as I've been in my career. I've known Margaret forever, who is your founder and CEO. And you guys think a lot about design principles. So I want you to get to that, but maybe in the context of young leaders you've been working with, including our community advisory group member, Ariana, shout out right there. Also, well, her bio won't be in there, just find her. Also extraordinary. You've been learning from young people about what are their right now, like highest priority economic thriving issues to write a bill of rights about that. And I'd love for you to share a little about what they're saying and what you think that implies in terms of policy and program design.
Sure. So we work with, like you said, youth leaders, and we kind of base what we do and what our focus is around what they're telling us is the most pressing issues. And in about 2018, I think they came up with the Youth Economic Bill of Rights, and RIGHTS stands for Real Youth Troubles and Solutions, RYTS. And that was really based around financial inclusion for young people in systems that historically have excluded young people, people of color. And so things like there needs to be a national youth banking standard where it's non-custodial accounts and youth have access to their banks. They have a right to have financial education, to be able to have access to their credit. So all these things that are super complicated that people felt, we really need access to these things to be successful. So now, post-pandemic, we thought this really needs a refresh and we need to look at this again to see what has changed. And I mean, it really just says everything everybody has said here today is what we're seeing young people say. So we have talked to youth leaders across the nation, and there are some things that are holding true. Like they still want financial education, they still want access to youth-friendly banking, but it is much more foundational than that. It is jobs. So that's, the first thing they say is like, I cannot manage my money and build wealth if I don't have a job. Yeah. So, making sure that there's workforce accessibility, housing. And, what's really interesting is typically we think of housing as an asset. So you want to aspire to own a home so that you can build generational wealth for your family. But they're really thinking just about having affordable housing and having
stable
a place
housing near my job.
Yeah, exactly. I just need a place to live. That's
right.
not like, and they're thinking about healthcare and transportation. In San Francisco, young people have free access to public transportation, and they're like, everybody needs that. Everybody needs a way to get to their job. So we're just finding that it's much more foundational, and those things need to be met before we can even think about getting them on a path to wealth building.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's so important about what you have layered in here, Claudia, is that when we got on the panel, you might have thought, oh, they're just talking about banking, or they might be talking about the public benefit system. But all of our lives have become so financialized. Like there isn't a system we're a part of that doesn't have some financial impact of our lives. Young people, in addition to the normal ones we have, like healthcare systems are deeply financialized. They can either set you on a healthy path or set you on a deeply indebted path where you are also not healthy. They are in the regular financial service system, which, as I already mentioned, because of lack of resources, they are in a less ideal, more predatory part of our system. The public benefit systems are deeply financialized systems that we have, but they're also in our education system. And our higher education system is one of the most brutal financialized systems for young people at this point. And so and you're seeing that, Claudia, in what they're caring about. They're like, basically, I am being inundated by a whole bunch of systems that are attacking me in various ways and making me unable to thrive. Claudia, Paige, you're nodding, and I'm wondering, how does that play into your work? You're working on benefits, but what else comes up?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've seen is that for students and young adults, it's really important to have no wrong door. Mm-hmm. So anywhere that they go, the people who they're talking to, whether that's faculty, staff, whether it's a trusted adult in their lives, should know exactly where to go to direct them to support. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important in the higher education system, especially as we're talking about benefits access and other financial resources, is making sure everyone knows exactly how to point students to the right place.
Yeah. And how do you do that on campuses? Who's the champion? Take one campus in your mind, either your original one when you were a young person, not a young person plus one, or one of the places you guys have expanded to. Who championed it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say often it's the faculty. That's who students are interacting with most on a day-to-day basis and who they really build trust with in their day-to-day lives. I think besides that, it's basic needs coordinators as well, the people who are working at the campus food pantries, and they're providing resources.
So they already exist on those campuses?
Yeah, I think a lot of times they do. They just don't have the time to connect students to the resources. So we have to find ways to expand their capacity. I think that student leadership is a really great way to do that.
I'm curious to have this conversation. So William, you were just saying that, again, read his bio. If a young person should be getting multiple job offers, quite genuinely, it should be you. And we're just in truly a really terrible economic climate right now. And Kate, you were talking about what are the individual decision-making and behaviors and learnings we need to have. And I want to get into a conversation of what is individual? What is a systems problem? What are ways to create systems that let better individual choices happen? Yeah. So maybe Kate, we'll start with you, and then William, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
In some ways, my response will sort of weave together some threads that have been in others' comments. So, we know that perspection, kind of future-oriented thinking, is a cognitive faculty that gradually develops along with changes in the prefrontal cortex and its connections within the brain. And so much of financial decision making is temporally extended decision making, needing to think about and anticipate future costs, future benefits of investment.
A future vision of who you are.
Yeah, a future
Literally,
vision of
like
who
who
you are,
is your
long-term
future
goals.
Yeah, that's right.
And that kind of decision making is scaffolded by certain types of behaviors. One is there needs to be some degree of predictability in a person's environment in order to encourage thinking many steps forward. You have to be able to anticipate what's going to happen. That is undermined by uncertainty, and it's undermined by being in conditions. If your basic needs aren't being met, then by definition, you're in an unpredictable circumstance because, your day-to-day needs aren't predictable. So, there is base provisions for providing young people with access to basic needs is almost a precondition to making intelligent financial decisions. There's it's a bit of an aside, but there's an interesting kind of theory that really comes from behavioral ecology, because you can see these sorts of behaviors across species. But when an organism, a bird is running out of food, when an organism is reaching a threshold for the resources that it needs for survival, its risk preferences shift. And a colleague of mine has referred to this as the desperation threshold. And suddenly, risk-taking behavior becomes advantageous, because if not, I'm not going to survive.
Yeah.
And we can't have young people flirting with the desperation threshold and then expect them to invest in their own future. There's nothing but the immediate is relevant if you're sitting near the desperation.
Near the edge. Yeah. And so, right, it means kind of what's on us is to create the more predictable, more reliable, more basic needs met as like a floor of what's tolerable. William, I'm curious how much of this burden, and you don't have to speak for yourself, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel like is sort of your fault versus the system's fault versus how do we, are you and your peers at about how much you can really do about it versus how much is sort of being stuck on you by decisions and choices we all made as adults?
I think like a good place to start is just like the context of which Gen Z grew up. Sandy Hook was a significant part that influenced our entire elementary and middle school and high school education. I still remember doing shooter drills in elementary school, in middle school, and it didn't stop there. There was countless more shootings. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And then you just see climate change and Greta Thunberg, and you're hopefully adults are starting to listen to young people. The Paris Agreement, it sucks. And then it just keeps going with police brutality and all of these things. So it's just really hard right now to for us as a generation to trust adults that they're going to do the right thing when literally the entirety of our generation has seen anything but.
Yeah, we've let you down over and over again.
But it just...
I'll say it. I'm an adult.
It's sad, but it just I think it shows why Gen Z is so resilient is because that we've had to be on survival mode our entire lives. It's been a thing that we've always had to do.
Yeah.
So for us, it's just it becomes second nature, if that makes sense.
It does, but it's not. That's a shameful way we're having your generation live. Let me just be clear about that. What would be a particular financial support related policy or practice, including benefits, that you think would make a marked difference? If everyone in this room could focus on a particular policy, what would it be in your mind?
Well, I think actually trusting young people with money. We tend to impose very paternalistic views of young people don't know what to do with the money. They're gonna go crazy. But if even research shows direct cash transfers that are happening now, this new model that we're transferring into, it shows that young people aren't gonna spend that all on candy or video games. They want to have
I think probably people probably said beer and avocado toast, but candy.
Yeah, it's basically it's different for Gen Z, but it just it's if we were able to get that trust from not young adult, but older adults and the older generation, that like we can actually do stuff. Like I cannot begin to imagine like the potential and the impact
Right,
we're
the
going to
totally
have.
different policy that would happen as a result. I'll just note that in the framework I spoke about earlier, a core component of it is young people having cash, like having enough money to thrive, whether that's through private wealth of their family or direct cash transfers. But young people need to be able to, in William's stage of life and Ariana's stage of life, focus entirely on investing in themselves. And that requires buying that time. And we need to buy that through either, guaranteed income or other forms of support. Claudia, what other policy priorities do you think come out of the Bill of Rights? Like there's several, but name another in addition to, and do you think what Will said about kind of trust and money, right? Resources and the trust to use those resources properly resonates with young people you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been a part of a few guaranteed income programs specifically for young people. And so thinking about how you're not just investing time and resources, but actual money and capital.
Yeah.
Guaranteed income is one thing, but then there's also, early wealth building accounts, the child savings accounts, things that, there are certain young people that they're going to have a chunk of cash when they, their parents are going to give it to them. How do you create those structures and those resources for those who don't have that?
Yep.
So is it a guaranteed income through a specific time of life? Is it also then like a child savings account that's meaningfully invested, right? Like you get a chunk of money and then trusting what they're going to do with it, but also giving them guidance. I do think that having them paired with a trusted adult to say, what are your goals and how do you want to spend this money is also very meaningful. We don't want to just be like, here you go, but also
resources when people need it and want it.
Yeah, at a very specific time when they need it, and it's going to help them get to that next level of thriving and not just surviving.
Yeah, we think about like the amount of money a young person needs. Well, yeah, a young person needs when they're like kind of out of when they're Paige's age. As do they have that investable sum of money to really start their next phase of their financial life towards wealth and ownership and real financial security. And my sort of like, simple brain thinks about and so maybe this will help you guys think about this too, but what do kids from families with private wealth get? That's just exactly what all kids need. Those kids thrive. They have all those things. Yeah. I am just trying to, all of us on this panel are just trying to synthetically make that possible for every other child in this country. Paige, what would be a big policy focus or practice focus for you that you'd want to offer this crowd in our last minute? Well, and I want to get Kate in if she has something.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to create certainty whenever possible. So like I was talking about, no wrong door, making sure that students or young people can always find exactly what they need to be successful at any time.
Well, and I think I'll just say that really relates to the uncertainty around food stamps this last year with all the government shutdowns. Everyone in this room needs to be an advocate for public benefits and the certainty that it gives young people. Thank you for bringing that up. Kate, anything else that might be at the more individual unit level or parent or teacher or mentor level?
This point about access to cash, being able to, this experience-based learning. We want young people to build decision-making habits of behavior, habits of spending, habits of saving. And the only way to do that is to have access.
Just to have something to do, right?
Yeah.
Right now they're trying to do that with scarcity, with nothing.
Yeah. So yes.
There needs to be something for William to practice.
The learning
with.
Can't occur.
That's exactly right. Okay, William, you have until we get yelled at to say some final words as the deep wisdom on our stage. And I'm just so grateful for your participation in the community advisory group and for being here today.
For sure. I've been thinking about this a lot, but we can have as many summits as we can.
Sure.
But there's always going to be the underlying structure that our system is broken. And it's up to us as Gen Z to kind of try to rebuild this because we are losing trust in the older generations. And if no one comes to save us, we have to help ourselves.
Totally.
So it's a call to action to be we need to come together as a society and acknowledge that our system is not working for everybody. And I will end with that.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.